All right, pop quiz, my little Encyclopedia Britannica. What is, or do you remember, the Cobra Kai motto?
Strike fast, strike hard, no mercy.
Aha, just like the new Viper that 908 just dropped.
Yeah, well, actually, dropping literally on Tuesday. We have an infomercial coming out with them. But you know that because they do roundhouse kicks to the face of unknowns with FTR and ramen.
And they've stitched in smart spectral processing, which is kind of like sweeping the leg and reading the compound.
Right. You don't even have to kick teenagers in the face with that.
But even without kicking teenagers in the face, which I think is badass in and of itself, because I have teenagers, it's still a really badass machine. You can kind of think of it like having Mr. Miyagi right in your corner.
You should check it out. Listen to the podcast next week and go to 908devices.com and have no mercy for your mystery chemicals. And in 2024, there was 138 hazmat responders in the U.S. that were injured, and that's 138 too many. Your team's mission is pretty simple. Do your job, do it well, and get everybody home safe.
But you can't just rely on theory. You actually need training that works in the real world.
That's why you should work with us, the Hazmat Guys, and we are a top-rated trainer by JM Powers in 23, 24, and 25, and we bring thousands of field hours, cutting-edge equipment, and fully customized programs to your team and your location.
And we make it so easy for you. It's a 3-step path towards zero-injury hazmat operations. Call and schedule a phone call with us. We tailor the training plan that fits your needs, and then we come and execute the best in-class training on your turf.
Now, your slots for Q4 are limited, so secure your team's spot today.
Hello, everybody out there in Hazmat Land. You're listening to this podcast. There is zero excuse for you not to be listening to Hazard Class with Jake. He's giving some in-depth interviews in both the hazmat and the emergency services world. Kind of touches a little on the fringes on the outside. And as long as you're exploring new podcasts, god damn, you need to be watching the Industrial Strength Show, which is really focused on the hazmat operations within the industry world. Totally different world than we are as first responders, and you definitely should listen to it because it's going to give you a really good glimpse into this completely different world.
Yeah, and the newsletter, right? So I don't care if you're hazmat adjacent. The newsletter is everything that's happening in the world of hazmat, read to you by Timmy, and it is just things to put in your head. Operations, fire, police, doesn't matter.
As somebody who hates to read, I love the newsletter podcast because I can just put it on and have it in the background. I can do my ADHD 9 different things while I'm absorbing the news. Trust me, go throw it on.
Yeah, and happy hour. If you haven't heard, you're living on a rock. Fourth Thursday of every month gets you into the roundtable type conversation. There's no holds, no bars, no limits, no nothing. And if you just show up, you get a scholarship, entered into the scholarship of the Southernmost Hazmat Conference, which, if you don't know what that is, that's February 3rd through the 5th in Key West. And grants are dropping imminently. So if you want more information about that, go to info@thehazmatguys.com. Oh, and Hot Zone. Next week, we're at Hot Zone, October 16th and 19th, and NASPO in Arkansas, November 3rd through the 5th.
And if anybody happens to be going to the Battery Conference in D.C. next week, I will be attending the conference, not speaking at the conference. So if anyone's around and you want to hang out, call Bob.
Yeah, that works. That works. We got it. And speaking of call Bob, we have to dust up the rest of the radiation, Class 7, Part 2.
Yes.
Part
we only did about half of it, so we gotta bang that out. Ooh.
I'm surprised, honestly. I'm surprised that all these DOT placards. We actually made these into 2 episodes, and I would have thought this would be a quick 9-episode series, and we're done. But this is not. This isn't even going to be. Oh, I'm spilling the tea, as the kids say. This isn't even going to be 9 episodes. It's actually going to be 18 episodes, probably, and it probably is going to be 20.
Well, in order to be 20, that math doesn't make sense. If we're doing 2 episodes, that would mean you'd have to do a class 10. There is no class 10. How that doesn't make any sense
More
at all.
on that later. There's good. There is word on the street is there. Class 10 is imminent as well as like a bomb dropping. So yeah, interesting stuff. It's coming.
So you know what? I'm kind of more surprised that it took us over 500 episodes to talk about the DOT classes.
I know. All right, let's get into this. It is decon and contamination control. With the decon, now just understand that rad can be solid, liquid, or gas. Okay, you got radon that comes through the ground and it can fill up your basement. In Pennsylvania, that's a big thing. I know that. But rad is typically, I'm going to say statistically, and somebody can call me out on it, is typically a solid.
Ooh, I might push back a little, not
you
because
think it's liquid.
Yeah, all right. So I guess we could look at this from multiple points of view, right? Like if we're looking statistically speaking at how it's used the most, I would say it's in liquid form because of all the medical isotopes that are floating around.
Yeah.
But like if you look at it from like an industrial point of view, all of those are pretty much all solids, and then the manufacturing would have some gases and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot more liquid out there than people realize, and they don't realize it because the dude in the Toyota Corolla who's dropping stuff off at the cancer center, he's not placarded.
That's a good point. Yeah, all right. So I would say what we can agree that I would think that the gas is probably the least transported one.
100%. Yeah. Okay. Absolutely.
All right. Well, if you have the solid, one of the things for decon is that taking off your gear could cause a little dust plume. And so Uncle Bob over here recommends taking some soapy water and just kind of tacking it down to take off your gear. Or else when you pop that thing off, like you're coming out of a Michael Jackson video, it's just going to be a plume of dust.
Think about it. Like this type of stuff already. Like if you want to envision this better, imagine a dimly lit room that's very dusty with a sunbeam coming in through the window. Mm-hmm. And you walk in and you kind of you touch something and all the dust whooshes up into the air. You normally wouldn't see it, but it is absolutely there and absolutely becoming contaminated. So one of the things that we want to make sure is that not just for ourselves, but for our equipment, that we've got these specific zones for dropping things off, right? We want to be able to, whether it's contaminated victims, whether it's our tools, whether it's our PPE, within that warm zone, the furthest area from the cold zone of the warm zone, we want to have these designated areas to try to help prevent this cross-contamination.
Another thing is the resource management, right? You're going to have specialized support for these things, specifically like the CST, which we just talked to on the last roundtable show. If you haven't listened to that, that was really good. But you're going to have events that you're going to need some help with the packages or possibility of breaching. That's where that whole TI number comes in with the box at the bottom.
Yeah, and there are a lot of 3-letter agencies that are out there to help you. So keep them in mind when you arrive onto one of these scenes, because early notification, whether it's a state radiation authority, whether it's going to be more on the federal level, like the Department of Energy, they have a whole radiological assistance program. You've got your licensees and the people that control the licenses, medical radiation safety officer, vendor recovery team. Depending on how complex this operation is, depending on whether or not the radiation got out of the package, you may want to just get the ball rolling. You can always call them up when you realize that everything's fine and be like, yeah, don't worry about it. Or they might just come by to see themselves.
Right. And you can always roll in the health physicist. I don't want to call out specifically, but like Oak Ridge, in Tennessee, they're the people that can take that and they can do contamination mapping and reconstruction of the scene way deeper than we can go here. But that rolls into let's say logistics. Right, the implementation of ALARA, as low as reasonably acceptable is important for the membership, right? Time tracking, how long were they in contact or within proximity, we'll say. Rotations, work cycles, work rest cycles, actually more accurately.
You know, it's funny because in every single radiation class we do, even a weapons of mass destruction class, general hazmat, we're always kind of talking about that ALARA, that time distance shielding. We talk a lot about the time, and you know, we go through the whole time and the math and how to do the math and how to figure out your dosimetry. But the reality of it is that math is impossible to do because you are constantly moving closer and further from the source on a moment-to-moment basis. There's no way to actually keep track of all your stuff, so it becomes really, really, really important that not a single person enter the hot zone without some form of personal dosimetry. And what this is going to do is this is going to actually track your accumulated dose over time. So you don't have to worry about that math. You don't have to do any of that stuff. You can concentrate on the mission in front of you and refer to the dosimetry when you want to be like, how close am I to dying?
You know, we were just doing a advanced radiation course in a location, and the instructors for the facility were telling the people in the class that when you make entry to a radiological area, only one person needs a record of dose. And I waited. I sat because I'm not going to tell these PhD people that had theoretical knowledge of how these things work. And I'm like, sounds great. And I let them walk out the door. I told everybody in the room, like, that is completely wrong.
It's completely wrong.
I'm like, every single person is getting a different dose because that would assume that the three people in your team are physically at the exact same distance for the exact same time, right, to all have the same number. And nobody's having matching numbers because you're all doing different things in different places for different times. I'm like, that is crazy.
For us as first responders, like we, those facilities, they might have, safeguards in place that keep people certain distances so they're not getting a massive dose or potential. But for us, we consider life to be the utmost of importance. So you may actually have to come in contact with the radiological material while doing a life safety operation. And if me and Bob are going in and Bob is making the grab and I'm only a foot behind him, well, it's getting different. A quarter of the dose that Bob is getting. So absolutely, every single person needs to be wearing it.
And the funny thing is like every single one of those nerds that were telling these guys all were wearing their own personal dosimetry like badges. And I'm like, how are you? Whatever. It doesn't. You get where I'm going, guys. You feel what I'm saying. But public information, right? You're going to have people that are going to be freaking out that you have radiation. So you're going to need a PIO and to explain what radiation is because tons of people just see it in the movies. They're like, it's bad. They don't understand what it is. They have to explain what controls are in place, what you're doing, and how the public is protected.
And don't select like Jack, who's only experience with radiation is he just had a stress test done last week and was really interested that he made the alarm in the front of the rig go off. You want to have somebody who is a professional. One of those three-letter agencies would be preferable because you want a coordinated, consistent message between the health guys, the environmental guys, and make sure that all of these agencies are all on the same page.
Hey, Mike, take a look around and tell me how many lithium-ion devices you have around you right now.
We got about 5 or 6.
See, I told everywhere around here, most fire departments are starting to see the battery fires on a regular basis.
And so we're excited to tell you about a new product that is proven to limit and control battery fire propagation. It's from a brand called Geo, and they are chock full of hazmat experts who absolutely know that there's a better way for us, the first responder, to handle, store, and ship these at-risk lithium-ion batteries.
Yep, this product will solve your lithium-ion battery problems because it's lightweight, it works across all battery types, and we can say it lives up to the hype because we've tested it firsthand.
Yeah, it's called ObexionFR, and it's part of a two-part system with a scientifically designed granular along with a UN-certified paler drum. The most important part of this is ObexionFR is proven to reduce the toxic IDLH gases emitted when these batteries kick off. So it's going to help keep your team safe.
So to learn more, go to thehazmatguys.dgeo.com. That's thehazmatguys.dgeo.com.
And as we're talking about batteries, we would be remiss if we didn't live up to our promise, which is looking into solutions for battery fires. Now, a lot of companies have come and presented their materials to us, and we've just been like, not really worth it. But there is one noteworthy product out there because it actually extinguishes the lithium-ion battery fires. It's not a one-trick pony. It works on multiple classes of fires. It also prevents the fire from spreading, and it keeps the lithium-ion battery from reigniting.
Now, before that guy with the keyboard starts getting on there and caps lock asking for proof, links are in the show notes for UL Class A and B, and also for BSI for 10 categories, including lithium-ion batteries.
We've put this through our own set of field tests, and I got to be honest with you, we were really impressed with the results. So we suggest that you do your own myth busting. I would go on and check it out and see what variety of options are going to integrate into your current process. You can check them out at Fire Suppression Solutions or click on the link in the show notes.
Let's get into the operational sequence, and this isn't I'm not going to say this is in order, but it's in a pretty good order. As a mental checklist, I would go this way. You got your recon, right? Confirmation, just making sure that it is. So you're going to do your remote recon first with like binoculars, drones, long-handled meters, right? Because time, distance, dose. That's another thing is that you don't think about when we're metering specifically for radiation, an extended arm is important because that distance, that as silly as that sound, that 2.5, 3 feet that you get on your arm is a difference. So you're going to try to identify your packages, markings, and damage via that method.
Yeah, we want to make sure to verify the shipping papers, the radiological labels, any of the transportation index information without adding any kind of additional risk to us. And this is one of those, like what I just said, lands within the theory world. Don't mistake what your meters are reading. Your meters are going to tell you what's actually happening. Your shipping papers, radiological material, and TI index is all theoretically what you should get. And I did a recording with the Volley House podcast last night, and one of the Lieutenant Kevin Yotes was telling his radiological story of how they had behind a grocery store and a BJ's, there was a tractor trailer with radiological placards all over it, everything properly placarded, and liquid is leaking out. Well, when all is said and done, they go through the whole thing, they open it up, and it was all rotten fruit. The owner of the vehicle at that point had come out and was like, "What are you guys doing with my truck?" And they're like, "What are you doing with radiological? Like, what's going on?" They got 0 readings throughout the whole incident. And he goes, "Oh, no, there's no radiological in there." He's like, "I throw radiation placards on there so people stay out of the truck." So, I mean, you don't get more, I've got labels, I've got everything that I should, but my meters told me a totally different story. So always remember that with radiation, with anything, right? You have your theory and then you have your reality.
I like that. So another thing is going to be your control and stabilization, which this guy is doing via placards. You're going to try to increase your distance. Better shielding, right? Dumpsters, fire trucks, fat guys, whatever, with available materials, and remove non-essential personnel from that area.
Once we've determined that nothing has come out of its package, and there are certain ways to do that, right? Like I wouldn't want to move things around without first confirming that they're not contaminated. But we can treat these like any ordinary package, right? If something's toppled over, write it up. You can reset seat lids. Maybe a pig's shielding opened up, and we can replace that shielding. We can reposition things to where they need to be to avoid people becoming exposed to it, and possibly open the scene up to what is needed. Like, we don't have to leave it there if we don't have to.
Now we get into tactical things, right? Where you got your monitoring, your zone, your documentation and stuff like that, because documentation is going to be a thing here. It's not typically on other hazmat incidents, but I would say on Rad, you're going to be writing some stuff down. So we're going to talk about dynamic boundary management, right? Not static. Like we're just dropping a cone and that cone never moves. These things move around. So you're going to have to map your dose rate, which is your dose over time, right? Dose is how much the odometer, speedometer is the dose rate. So we want to know the dose rate, contamination footprints to refine the hot and the warm zones. We need to be monitoring the exit area of the warm zone to make sure that that zone isn't creeping, and sweeping the corridor or the cold zone every once in a while. Don't assume the cold zone's staying cold, because warm zone creeps. And so you're going to need to send a guy to go Z pattern back and forth in the cold zone to make sure it's not moving somewhere else.
Yeah, and we want to be very clear with our boundaries. Most of the times in hazmat, I know we train the 3 circles and the this and that. We don't ever do that. Who the hell actually puts out tapes and barriers? Very minimal does that actually happen. But with radiation, we really need to, because of that. It's so easily contaminatable, if that's a word. That you want to, use the tape, use the cones, use things that are visible from a distance to help reduce the zones becoming breached by accident.
Now, just as we just said before, is that you're going to need. I cannot personally advocate any stronger than, we need radiation meters. You need radiation meters to establish zones, but you also need personal dosimetry meters, which we call dose of record, because if 30 years down the road you catch the cancers, that is what you're going to point to. And so you should have a personal dosimeter, a personal odometer, right, of how much you got, whether it's a TLD or a film badge or whatever, for record keeping for your personal health. I would say it's probably more important than actually figuring out the zones.
Yeah, but there's only one department that I have ever come across that has legal dose of record, and that happens to be who we used to work for. So it's just another reason to get those 3-letter agencies involved. Maybe get your CSTs there as quickly as possible, because they're going to be able to bring those dose of record things to help keep everybody absolutely safe. One of the things that we want to do is conducting an exit survey on everybody who leaves the hot zone. I don't care if you've just been through decontamination, right? You need to be checked. Radiation is the easiest thing to pick up, and you absolutely need to make sure that we're keeping the contamination within the area that it's designed to be.
This one is a necessary evil, is evidence chain preservation and custody, right? You're going to photograph the packages. You're going to any damage, any meter displays from safe distances, because don't do it right on top. I mean, Alara, please.
Alara, right. You gotta work. And you know what? This is going to be one of those things where you absolutely have to keep a log custody and kind of anything that has happened to that, especially if it's contaminated, right? They want to make sure everything is tracked, but try to do your best to be as detailed as possible in those logs that Bob was talking about, because you're going to be questioned, especially if something goes wrong later on or there's contamination. Like, they're going to want to literally know, okay, what was the serial number of the meter that you were using? Yeah. Give me a picture of how far away you were when you were measuring that. Like,
when was the last time the cable that was certified? Right. It's like, what?
let me see the source that you confirmed the 20%. It's a lot. When the radiation happens, it is a huge pain in the ass. Not in the moment, but afterwards. Or, once you hit past that secondary, once you get into secondary response, the hazmat operation becomes a huge pain.
They're going to be asking for a lot of receipts. So now the public, right? We started to evacuate, whether we evacuate a shelter, right? Usually early, conservative standoff distances. If you're an operations level, you're pulling that from the ERG. If you're a technician and above, you're going to be doing it from the meter, but you're going to do it on dose rate readings.
And as weird as it sounds, sheltering in place is actually the preferred method of how do we keep people safe? I know everybody thinks, radiation, we need to run, but the reality is we're more concerned about the contamination. So if we can keep people within a shelter, we can prevent them from becoming contaminated by going outside and moving through the area.
Now, we're going to have to do medical screening and triage, right, for symptomatic and potentially highly exposed victims. So we're going to prioritize removal from those high fields and use rapid medical evaluations.
Yeah, and we always want to start with just our handheld meters when it comes to screening. Use the probes that are specifically designed for it. Perform it the correct way. If somebody gets hit, you're gonna divert them to the decon, and then after decon, they're gonna go get checked out medically.
At a certain point, you're going to have people that were in the zone prior to your arrival, and they're going to need decon, right? So there's going to be victim decon. We're going to start with dry decon. I personally prefer if it's dry, and by saying dry decon, I'm saying I'm not going to be stretching a hose line and starting to hit people with hose lines, right? For the most part, again, I want to remove the outer garments post putting a little soapy water spritzer bottle, like just a lightweight application to stick it to them, and then consider maybe gentle washing afterwards. And I know, and we've said this many times, what the modesty, the people, trust me, they are going to be scrambling to get naked, and it's going to be a glorious day.
Anyway. If you do end up using water, which, like, I agree with Bob 100%. You really shouldn't, right? Like, you shouldn't be using water. But if you do, you got to contain that runoff. We wouldn't halt decon because we couldn't contain the runoff, but we really are thinking contamination and spreading contamination. That's one of our most important things. And anytime you do any kind of decon, you need to do post monitoring to make sure to confirm the effectiveness of that decon.
Now, in addition, you're going to have us coming out of the scene, the responders, right? So there's going to be equipment, and there's going to be us. And where is the majority of the radiation? It's going to be on the ground, right? And they call it ground shine. And so we're going to be probably putting down an awful lot of pads, step-off pads, and that kind of stuff. You're going to be doing controlled doffing, tool wipe-downs to prevent tracking that contamination somewhere else.
Yeah, bagging our decon, bagging our PPE, labeling the radioactive waste, securing it within the warm zone to pen transfer. These are all things that are going to be expected of you. And while you're out there and you're performing the evaluations, you might come across the packaging and the controls. Understanding that there's different both packaging as well as labels out there is going to kind of help you determine how you're going to move forward. So the I'm not going to say the least effective type, but I guess the one that contains the least amount of radioactive material is going to be a type A packaging, right? You have it's there to do your basic radiation transport. When you get the higher level stuff, like, the nuclear power stuff, the really high energy level, those tend to be transported in type B packaging, and they are specifically engineered for severe accident conditions.
Now, we also industrial packages, and they have with LSA and SCO type materials. Now, if you don't know what LSA and SCO, go back and listen to the last episode because we talked about that at length.
Yes, we did. Now, you got placards and labels as well as paperwork. Our labels we're going to have a white 1, a yellow 2, and a yellow 3 label, and these are going to indicate what's known as the transportation index. That is a whole kind of separate drill and animal using the transportation index properly. You may also come across something that says FISSILE. FISSILE, and that is going to be specific for spacing and handling controls.
Yeah, and shipping papers are going to list any radionuclide activity, the emergency contact. You're going to need to cross-check this to guide your tactics. Confirm.
When you are actually when we're on a radiation run, right, you open up your radiation package, there's going to be a ton of different probes and meters. They all kind of do different things. They all specialize in something different. They're all going to let you know that radiation is there, but if you have a specific job, you want to kind of go with the proper meter for that specific mission. For dose rate survey meters, we try to prefer like an ion chamber or an energy compensated Geiger-Muller tube meter, because it gives a very robust kind of gamma reading up close.
And keep your probes pointed at the suspected source. Like, don't get lazy and just kind of like drop your arm down. Like, we're always pointing at that source to make sure that we keep that ALARA time distance shielding thing in place.
You know, the contamination for almost everything else doesn't become much of an issue because obviously we're deconning. But if we get contamination on our probes, then we start to have issues. And your pancake Geiger Muellers or that the Mylar window type of detectors, they're really useful for the beta and alpha and gamma type radiation, but they can become contaminated very easily, mainly because they are so close to the source when we were using them.
In that class we were just doing, I was re-shocked because we actually had some real sources and we were doing some real swipes and stuff. I mean, like some seriously hot sources, like legit, not simulated, legit. And I was shocked at how fast you have to go, and I say that wrong, how slow you have to go to actually get the ticks, because the ticks only happen like based upon, so if you move, it was seriously like more than an inch a second. If you moved faster than that, you were not, it was just a blip. It was an anomaly. And going slow, using those swipes, the stat counters, because and I'm talking about legit sources. If you have a moderate or a low source, you're going to have to go even slower than that. So you need to take time to do your section, your grid, whatever you want to say, sweep.
Yeah. Now there's we had, because we were a high risk for a radiation incident, portals. And those portals are absolutely phenomenal for being able to do large quantities of people. If you're in a situation where you are in a high risk, I would highly recommend looking into the portals. They're like metal detectors, like giant, like walk-through metal detectors, and they pick up really trace amounts of radiation. They're super, super sensitive, and they're a great thing if you ever have to do like a mass type of surveying.
Yeah.
I said that wrong. It's not surveying. It's frisking. There we go. Frisking.
Yeah.
All right. We want to understand, as a technician, we want to understand the instruments, their limitations, and their uses. And one of the things we absolutely need to do is to calibrate and check these sources regularly, both before response and while we're responding. We need to understand small minuses about the equipment, like dead time and saturation risks.
Yeah, and I know this sounds basic, but check your background before you go in. Because if you don't know what is normal, you don't know what's abnormal. And so check that and keep that for the running log of all your readings.